Hello, hello. It's been some time since I've made a video, and I thought I'd ease back into things with a little bit of a lighter topic. So today we're talking about grief. Most people are understandably uncomfortable with the topic of grief, but it's so important that we learn about it and talk about it because it's an inevitable part of life. It's a universal experience. There's no escaping it. Please don't ever die. Understanding grief more deeply can help you navigate your own journey and offer better empathy and support to those around you when they experience loss. We grieve many different types of losses, whether it's the end of a relationship or losing your job, your home, your health, or any other significant life changes. But last week was the 1-year anniversary of my dad's death, so today we're focusing on that kind of grief, loss of a loved one. Or 2 or 3. It's been a difficult year, but it's taught me a lot. So today I'm talking about what I've learned about grief and the grieving process. First, I want to start with the 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. You probably already know each of these, so I won't break them down, but what you may not know is that this is an outdated, reductive, and inaccurate model of grief. In fact, the researcher who came up with the 5 stages of grief, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, has said she regrets how widespread the misunderstanding of this model has become. Like I said, there are different forms of grief, and it turns out the 5 stages were never meant to be applied to loss of a loved one at all. It was developed to better understand the emotional journeys of people who are diagnosed with terminal illness. But even then, it wasn't meant as a one-size-fits-all, step-by-step formula for that type of grief either. The grieving process is very personal and complex. So these stages might help someone understand some of the emotions they may experience, but that's about it. The grieving process isn't linear. You don't necessarily complete stages and move from one to another in an orderly path. You can jump from emotion to emotion. One day you might feel sad, and the next you could feel angry, guilty, or even relieved, depending on the situation. You can also revisit emotions you thought you moved past. Just when you begin to feel at peace, you might find yourself struggling to grasp the reality of your loss. Better yet, come to a place of acceptance with it. You might think you're starting to heal, only to find yourself suddenly overwhelmed with grief again. Because grief comes in waves. Feelings will be super intense at times, and it may feel like they'll always be that way, but they do calm back down. Sometimes you can anticipate waves when there are more predictable triggers, like holidays and anniversaries. This sucks. Special occasions, certain places, songs, or food that reminds you of the person you lost. But these waves can also be incredibly unpredictable. There's a YouTube video I watched recently that demonstrated this really well. It was from Curtis Connor, who makes comedic commentary videos. I don't know, genres are difficult for me, but he's a funny guy. And in this particular video, he was on a journey to find an obscure product from the 90s that he'd fixated on.
Video gear command set. It's the ultimate video game accessory.
And, spoiler alert, he was able to find it against all odds.
I got one.
So he's enjoying his new video gear command center and playing Mario Kart and having a blast, and suddenly he starts to get emotional. He actually broke from his video to talk about it and said that it was because he had lost his stepfather the year before. That switch from fine to actively grieving happens to me all the time. And that's okay. I'm so glad Curtis was willing to stray from his normal content and take a moment to be serious and vulnerable.
Yeah, the grieving process.
Because these waves of grief are normal, and they need to be normalized. There's no timeline for the grieving process, no matter what anyone else thinks. People are generally much more understanding in the beginning. If you suddenly start crying and you explain that your dad died a week ago, people are totally sympathetic and compassionate. But if the same thing happens out of nowhere 10 months later, people might be a little less understanding. It's kind of like, okay, why are you thinking about that now? But other people's perceptions don't make your emotions any less valid. Even people who have been through significant loss themselves might not realize how unique the grieving process is for each person and each loss. I find this to be a good rule of thumb in general, but I think one of the best tips for navigating grief is to forget the shoulds and shouldn'ts. Some examples. You should have moved on already. I should be handling this better. You should go out with your friends and distract yourself. I should be stronger than this. You should keep busy. I shouldn't be quietly crying in the office at 3 p.m. on a Wednesday. Now, the one shouldn't that I do believe in when it comes to grieving or any emotional processing is that we shouldn't consistently choose the path of avoidance. It's important to work through the grieving process. It's important to ride the waves so they can pass again and you can heal and grow and keep moving forward. If you choose to constantly suppress those emotions and avoid them using drugs or alcohol or work or whichever escapes and distractions you rely on, the waves will keep building. That unprocessed grief will catch up. It can affect you physically and emotionally in ways you don't even realize are connected to that avoidance. It can affect your relationships and work and personal growth. You don't have to be feeling all this pain and processing emotions all the time. Some distraction is good, but please make sure you aren't consistently avoiding the process. But besides that, forget the shoulds and shouldn'ts. They won't help. And be careful with comparisons. Again, grief is a very unique process. No two timelines are the same, and something that might help one person might not help another. Your emotions and triggers and overall experience of grief is going to be different from someone else, even if they've had a similar loss in their life. It'll also be different from others who just lost the same person as you, because besides you being unique, your relationship to the person you've lost is unique. Some say that grief is just love with no place to go. It's love persevering. So no matter what your relationship with that person looked like or what your connection was, if you had genuine love for them, you have a reason to grieve. When I mentioned losing my dad, some people have asked if we were close, and we were. But even if we weren't, that wouldn't determine how much I should be grieving. An outsider probably won't understand the connection you had to your friend's dad or your dog or your coworker from a job you left over 3 years ago. But an outsider's lack of understanding doesn't take away from the meaning of the relationship to you. It doesn't invalidate the extent of your grief. So because grief is so unique and personal, it can feel very isolating, especially when combined with the fact that most people are uncomfortable talking about grief or any negative emotions and don't know how to support someone going through them. If you want to be a better support to someone who's grieving, I think the best advice is to just sit with that person in their feelings. A lot of times our natural instinct is to fix people's problems and provide solutions to get rid of their negative emotions. People say things like, "Don't worry, it'll get easier. He's in a better place now." I hate that one. You'll find someone else. Everything happens for a reason. Plus all those other shoulds and shouldn'ts from earlier. People do this with good intentions, but it often hurts more than it helps. Someone grieving needs to work through their process. So please resist trying to interrupt their wave by giving advice or trying to cheer them up or distract them, unless they ask you to. That might be what they need in the moment, so then it's totally appropriate. A lot of times people will offer help by saying something like, "Just let me know if you ever need anything at all." Again, this is meant with good intentions, but a lot of those people may find it difficult to show up if you told them what you really needed. Can you sit with me while I cry? Can you do it while seeming compassionate instead of uncomfortable? Can you listen to me talk about what I'm honestly going through? As someone providing support in this situation, it's important that you know that there's nothing you can say or do to take away their grief. Quick side story. Immediately after my dad died, I was in a lot of pain, obviously, and I wasn't really in denial, but I was relying heavily on humor to cope with the shock. So when a chaplain came to the house, he expressed his sympathies and asked if there was anything he could do for us. and I asked if he could bring my dad back. My dad would have thought that was funny, but I'm not sure if the chaplain did. My delivery was probably kind of dry, and I'd imagine it's uncomfortable to laugh in a situation like that anyway, so he didn't really respond, and I very quickly was like, hey, I'm sorry. I appreciate you. That was a joke, and I can't help myself right now. I need to go to another room. So, assuming that you can't bring back the dead either, there's nothing you can do to take away someone's grief. You can't end it. But you can be helpful. You can show them empathy and understanding and acceptance by being present with them as they experience their negative emotions. Let them ride the waves and make sure they know it's okay to do so. When you're the one grieving, you'll quickly realize that most people don't offer this kind of support. It's totally natural to shy away from otherwise close connections if they don't. It's disappointing, but it's not personal. And it's okay to want to process and work through some of these emotions alone. But please try not to completely isolate. You may feel rejected after first turning to people who aren't helpful, and you probably won't want to be a burden or a downer, especially after it seems like people don't have space for your emotions. If you can't feel comfortable feeling them around other people, you might feel like you have to deal with it all alone all the time. But that feeling of rejection is not because something's wrong with you. There are people who can have compassion and understanding, even if they can't 100% totally understand everything you're experiencing. I've taken comfort in talking to people who knew my dad because I love talking about my dad. And I've taken comfort in talking to people who have also had significant losses, but who respect the uniqueness of the grieving process. No shoulds and shouldn'ts. No invalidation. I'm also pretty comfortable with emotional vulnerability. So for a while, if anyone genuinely asked, like, hey, how are you? What's new? I was immediately going straight to, my dad died and it sucks and I'm fine.
I'm fine!
I'm working through it. Some people just show sympathy and then move on, but some people who get it really take that opportunity for connection. For example, I went to the bank to open a CD on Black Friday last year, and the woman who was helping me asked how my Thanksgiving was. I said it was good, but kind of difficult because it was the first one without my dad. And we ended up having this great conversation for like a half hour, sharing our experiences with grief. We didn't become besties, and she's not a consistent support in my life, but it's still nice to have those little connections and know that you really aren't alone in what you're going through. If you aren't as comfortable trauma dumping on unsuspecting strangers, I'm just kidding, I don't go that far, and you still feel like you need more support, you can find a grief counselor or a therapist, or a bereavement group is a great option. Books, podcasts, and videos aren't the same as getting to share your own experience, but they can still be really helpful in better understanding grief and feeling less alone in the process. I will link some that I've found helpful in this video's description. My research has backed up a lot of the information I said in this video. I didn't make it all up. I had a few lessons about life that I've learned through the grieving process that I also wanted to share today, but this video has gone way longer than I expected, so I'll save those for another time. If you liked this video and want to see more of my content, please hit the subscribe button. It really helps support this channel. I started doing this almost a year ago, and it's been a tough year, and this is a lot of work, and I haven't been able to upload as consistently as I was originally hoping. But I still have almost 1,000 subscribers already, and I could not appreciate you guys more. So as always, thank you for watching this video, and I hope to see you in the next one. Peace. Lolita! Lola, where are you? Promise me you won't ever die. Please.